All right. Welcome to the node.js Diagnostic Working Group meeting, July 28th, 2021. To start with, are there any announcements? Okay, so we go with the agenda that is listed in issue number 488. First one is async hooks multi-tenant promise hook API 39283. Stephen?
Yeah, so I'm working on that. There's a few open questions though. But basically, I'm trying to expose the promise hook API to userland, and then just having async hooks consume that like under the surface. So there's like a handful of open questions related to it. I've currently made it a top level module, just like promise underscore hook hooks, I think. Yeah, there's like seems to be in the issue conflicting opinions on if it should be a top level module or if it should be under async hooks right now, or if it should be just temporarily under async hooks. There's also so when I did diagnostics channel before, I approached that from like the angle of it being a minor, like some for a minor change, with the intent that it would get backported, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I want this to be backported if we can, and at that point, it was agreed that adding a new top level module was not a Semver major change, and like the docs suggest that, but in this issue, like a bunch of people seem to be suggesting that it is or should be a Semver major change. So not sure how to deal with that exactly. But yeah, basically like this issue just needs some review and decision if having it as a top level module is fine or if we should do it differently. There's also some questions about like the shape of the API. So that this is like in some ways slightly similar to async hooks, but has very different intent. So it like I was not really trying to reproduce the form of the async hooks API. Like this, rather than having the like strictly the create hook interface where you have to like pass in an object with a bunch of like named functions, this you can actually just interact with each separate hook independently. This has a way to do the like all-in-one just for convenience, but it's more the intent that you just be able to interact with each hook individually. But like there was like suggestion that this should have the like same shape as async hooks with like the disable function and all these sorts of things. Yeah, just like to get some opinions from diagnostics working group folks on what they think of this and what the direction should be.
Because in the end, this this API, is this one of the APIs like async local storage you think, could potentially go to stable and persist even if we chose to get rid of async hooks themselves?
Yeah, so this is like a much simpler API than async hooks. It doesn't expose internals. All it does is just hand you a promise whenever a promise is created, not really telling you anything about what it is. So you can do whatever you want with that promise.
I'm just sort of like trying to, think about does it belong under async hooks or belong in a separate, like if we were building it today, would we group that as part of that, or like a separate top level module makes sense?
Like it's functionally different, and like I think at least like userland use of it would be somewhat different. Like it's not really intended for any sort of context management or anything like that. It's just intended to like observe when a promise happens. It's like you can't really build CLS on just that. You need like all of it async hooks, so like it can be used to feed some of the events into async hooks, and like it doesn't even do like the destroy hook. You have to layer that on top, which is what's happening inside of async hooks.
Does it need to be public at this point? Like I can see you're trying to pull out some layers and it sounds like you're using it internally, right?
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be public, but it's just helpful, I think. And like it does give you you get access to the current promise and the parent promise in the init hook, which can be helpful for tying things together.
I was just wondering, like, is that a way to work around? Like, is your main goal to make a new public API, or was it sort of partially a step in the refactoring of pulling things apart?
It's a bit of both. So I wanted to make a new API that's like could be consumed in core, like if there's other places that want to use this, but it's more intended for like I know there's a bunch of like userland uses of async hooks that only listen for promises, so like having all of async hooks just to listen for promises seems a bit overkill.
Right. Okay. So in that sense, having a new API could reduce the usage of async hooks. So it's covering one of the use cases without having to use async hooks itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure we had a discussion around this sometime in the past, but like, there's no other like just generic diagnostics or top level module, right? Because I think, the async hooks name is partially what seems off. If it's kind of like, hey, this is not async hooks, then why is, and even the context local storage, I know there was a discussion about that, and I think it ended up there partially to avoid having to create a new top level.
Yeah. Yeah. I like personally, my feeling is like we should just be making stuff like top level. Like new things like this should be top level unless like it really makes sense that it is like directly tied to this other thing. Like in my opinion, like async local storage should be its own top level thing. It's confusing that it's in async hooks to anyone that's not like already familiar with async hooks in the context of like why you should be using this and not this other thing.
Right, I'm just was wondering if there's some other grouping that actually does make sense. Like, does each of these new things need to be its own top level, or would some other grouping, not async hooks, make some sense?
Yeah.
Like, would people be complaining if the top level thing was called diagnostics? Or are they, that still wouldn't make sense?
Well, I have been thinking that like we should like make more use of like nested paths. Like if we put a bunch of this stuff under like diagnostic / promise hooks, diagnostic / like async local storage.
Right.
That's something like if we just claimed like some top level scope for like all of the stuff we do.
Right. And would that then, like, would be adding something that would that be considered, like, would that avoid this discussion of saying, hey, you're adding a new top level because it was adding something under the other top level?
Yeah. I think that shouldn't matter because like the main issue that people generally seem to have is like, oh, like this might like clobber some like npm package name,
Right.
but you can't really do that if you're under like an already claimed top
Right.
level.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So if you look, like, if we look at, yeah, there's an npm, there's a diagnostics npm module.
Yeah, I think we can like contact them and ask if we can like, take the namespace if it's not like actually
It's got
popular.
1 million weekly downloads.
The
Yeah.
issue with top level module is because it will take some time to land or something like that. I don't get necessarily why we can't do a node prefix using top level module for the diagnostic, like you said, Stephen, diagnostic / async groups or something else.
We also have like that node : thing. We can just like put it behind that. I don't know too much about how that actually works yet, though. I haven't looked too closely.
Yeah, like I saw the article or saw the thing saying you can now use this, whether that's informational or actually restricts. So I guess it sounds like, you're thinking it would be nice to have it as a separate module, like top level module, but possibly one that we should, instead of creating a specific one, it would be better to create one we could then layer things underneath, right?
Yeah.
And then in the future, it would make easier. And I'd agree that like making an alias for CLS that was underneath that would be nice if we can do that.
Yeah. To me, it makes most sense that like any like working group that does like any significant contributions to core, like it makes most sense to me that the working group would have their own like directory where all their stuff can go, named appropriately. So, like as diagnostics working group, we would have like a diagnostics directory where all our stuff would go.
As long as it kind of makes sense to Yeah, like, you could have, I guess I'm just testing it against, like, say, HTTP. Would that make sense? There'd be like an HTTP one, and underneath there could be like HTTP 1, 2, 3. That would make some sense too.
Or like you might have like security/crypto, something like that.
This makes the names a little bit longer, but it seems like it would be good to not have like because if it's strictly that outside naming issue, that sounds like that would solve that. And
Not sure how possible it is, but that like node prefix, if we could make it so there's like all the existing stuff like takes priority over user land, but like new stuff is like lower priority than user land, and then you have to use the node prefix to get these other things or something like that. That could be a possibility.
yeah, it does seem like if it was guarded by node : then like it's not stomping on anything else, right?
Yeah.
If it was basically node : diagnostics, I don't know if, it would be like, do you want to make it shorter or longer, like node : diag / and then promise hooks or something, or whatever I don't know, this one was named.
Yeah.
Maybe it's worth proposing that and seeing what people think.
Of course, Diag is taken too.
No, I know, but that's what I was saying. Like,
Only
but
4
if
weeks.
it's node : and it's, that basically means that, you can still do a require diag if you want to.
Yeah.
Shouldn't. Diag is, it's only got 4 weekly downloads, so that one might be one to get anyway. But I'd still make the argument that, like, if node : I don't know how it works, but if it works such that is, you're only going to get a core module, then I assume that it doesn't matter that there's one with the same name, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was thinking it might be a reasonable suggestion if it's like node : diag / whatever. It's like that doesn't stomp on anybody. It's purely additive. See if there's any other reasons that people come up with.
Yeah.
Or there's the, yeah. So maybe that's worth, because I can see you've got the conflicting, some people's like, hey, just take the easy way and put it out under async hooks. But then there were a few people saying, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's just kind of difficult to figure out like which direction should I actually be going with this PR, because everyone has like completely different thoughts on what things should be.
I guess I'd be tempted to try that, like the suggestion of the node : diag / whatever. And if that ends up being like, controversial, this isn't going to work, whatever, I'd be tempted to fall back to, well, let's just put it under async hooks now while we figure out the longer term story, which has been, I think, the fallback in a number of cases.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I could see the discussion carrying on for a while.
Yeah.
I see you've commented, do you feel strongly that it should be underneath there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that solves that part, and then like the others just like, does the API look reasonable? Do we want to change any of the shape of it?
I assume it'd still be experimental, right?
Yeah, it did land as experimental, same as always.
Yep. So we could still change a little bit. And this is exposing like the V8 level functionality.
Yeah,
And I guess that's something like commonly going to be available in different JavaScript engines, always in V8.
Yep. Yeah, it exists in V8. I don't know about other JavaScript engines, probably not.
Just sort of thinking about like, is there any chance that they'll deprecate it at some point, or has it
I
always
don't.
been there?
Well, I can't really comment on the like new promise hook API. This is exposing the like new JavaScript promise API that I made. The like old one, they are using it in like their debugger and some other places. So like I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. The new API, I mean, who knows? But like since we are a user of it, um, I think V8 would not deprecate it lightly.
Right.
And like I've been in discussion with them a bit about like seeing if any of their uses of the like existing C++ API would be better served with this. So, yeah, I don't really see Promise Hook disappearing anytime soon.
Okay. Yeah, I was just poking at that. So I guess you're just asking that also like, hey, can people take a deeper look? Are there any things in particular that you think like, are interesting to discuss, or are, like you're asking for if people think it should be changed? Were any things you thought about where it's like, well, I could do this or could do that? And
Like there's some comments about like it should maybe be shaped more like the async hooks API with like returning an object with a disable function and like those sorts of things. And like some comments that like it maybe shouldn't expose each individual hook. I don't really see any particular reason why it should look more like async hooks. To me, that just seems kind of confusing since the APIs do totally different things, and it's not really meant to serve the same thing that async hooks is. It's kind of incidental that it happens to be a source of some of async hooks' information.
what's the comment about not exposing all the hooks? You'd still need to expose things.
So right now I have like there's one function that you can attach all of the hooks that's similar to the create hook function on async hooks.
Right.
But then I also have like on init, on before, on after, on resolve. So you can just interact with each hook directly.
Right.
So you can just say like, here's my function to run when an init happens. And that's it. And you can like it returns a cancel function, like stop listening. And yeah, that's it. So it's like really simple if you only care about one event. But there's like some comments that like maybe we shouldn't be exposing like each of these like single events. We should only have the like one entry point.
Right. I guess that would just be less surface area, right? But
mean, like, I don't really see the mechanics of promises changing anytime soon, so I don't think
Mhm.
that like 4 set of events is gonna change. So I don't
Yeah,
really see any.
before, after, and resolve is.
All right. So essentially, the bottom line of the discussion is that we should have more review on the PR or eyes on the PR.
Yeah, more review, and yeah, just helping to decide like what should we actually do with this.
Makes sense.
The one curious thing I have is like, you mentioned that there's some use cases where you need just this versus the full async hooks. Do we have that captured somewhere, like in our list of alternate use cases for async hooks?
Yeah. Someone suggested that. I think in the use case gathering blog post thing. Yeah, and Andreas suggested like there's a use case for counting promise objects.
Let's just, which issue was that? That was
482 on the diagnostics repo.
okay. I'm just thinking, taking like, when I go to look at this, looking at that is a little bit useful as well to say, okay, what's the use cases in terms of the API?
Yeah. Yeah, and I know Node Clinic also does some like extra stuff when it sees something from async hooks that is a promise. So that could possibly just be like it separately listens to promises.
Anything more on
That's
this?
it on that one. Sorry, go ahead, Jerish.
I was saying, are we done with this, or are there more comments on this?
I think we can move on.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is inactive branches in the repo, which is 486. I created this issue. So I was solving some other issue and came across the fact that our diagnostic repo has so many branches, probably stale branches, because we don't do any release as such. It's rather static repository with PRs and issues. I'm not sure why we have so many branches. Not sure whether it's part of some old PR practices where you directly create a branch in the upstream and then merge it with the master. I'm not very clear on that aspect, so I thought we'll just, as a team, have a look at that and decide what to do with that. The branch names are something with the, some of them are by specific names such as rich, And some of them are by the name of the capabilities, such as trace events, champion, etc. Anybody remembers
Yeah,
anything on how they created branches?
I think that may just be like sometimes people created branches in the repo versus the regular, the PRE type. Because if we look at active, there aren't any active branches. How old are these stale branches?
Some of them are 3 years.
7 months.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be tempted to just delete them all.
Yeah, maybe we can add the settings in the repo for whenever a PR is closed or merged, the branch is automatically deleted.
It's possible that they're already merged as well, and the branch still exists because someone
Well,
just forgot.
several of them say that. Like I'm looking at this pages, which is the stale branches, and it actually says, oops, sorry. No. Where's chat here? But many of them say
sorry,
they're merged.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand what Raphael said, because when we raise a PR, we are pushing the branch to the collaborators fork, and the branch will exist not in the upstream. Am I right?
Yeah.
What is the condition in which the branch gets into the upstream?
Whenever a PR is made, actually, even if a PR is made, the upstream don't receive the branch. Actually, only if it's created by one of the contributors in the same upstream. So I would say for this case, we can just allow to delete branches whenever it's closed by the bot of the GitHub. This is pretty simple. I will check.
Yeah,
here just to see.
I think these are just ones where instead of doing in our own repos, in a clone, we did it in the repo itself, either by accident or because it was easier.
Okay.
Here, the option
Yeah,
is automatically delete head branches in the settings of the repo. If you enable that, that's should be enough.
Yeah, I just deleted one of mine, which I'm pretty sure I just used the like GitHub like edit in place thing that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier sometimes, right? Like you're making a one line change versus forking and pushing. And so I suspect that's just what happened for most of these. Certainly I see one with my name in it. It's probably the same thing.
Yeah, mine was just like adding a link to the like org calendar.
And like a bunch of them say merge. So I think those are pretty safe to delete because it's pretty much that. And actually a whole bunch of them have pull requests. And there I see you said landed. So I think like of those there's only like 2 that don't say closed or merged. One which has my name on it and I have no idea what's there. So I'm just going to delete it. And then there's one that's that Mary opened 11 months ago. Maybe we leave that one, delete all the others, and then just ask Mary to delete that one if it's not needed.
Fair enough. Looks good. Thanks. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is 437. Identify async hook use case beyond async local storage. Again, to Stephen.
Yeah. So put together the blog post for that, and it's been published. Hasn't been a ton of response to that so far. I think there's like one comment added to the issue, just asking about like the domains use case.
Has it been tweeted by, I assume it was tweeted by the Node account?
I don't know if it was. I don't think I ever saw that.
Let's see.
You please
Go into.
ping the tweet here in the chat window.
So I want that one. Sorry, I'm just doing another tweet, but yeah. So you're saying you posted in the chat the tweet that did go out?
Yeah, I don't see any tweets.
Okay. So here I'm going to, there is a repo, which one is it? Tweet. So I think like this one here. I'm going to create an issue. New issue. Although I think I need to make a pull request. Sorry. How do we do that? Sorry. In there, there's.
Looks like there is a PR opened as an example.
Right. So if I do a new tweet, I'm going to be able to easily new pull request. I guess I actually got to fork this now to. I think we should do that to get. Here, do I already have that forked somewhere? I've done it somewhere, but anyway.
And I just pasted the link to the blog post itself. It seems to have like one reply like directly on the post rather than in the issue. Commenting on like tracking requests.
I'm just gonna make, there we go, where's, so async. I thought I just tweeted something, but no. Sorry, I'm just looking to see if I can, okay, there we go. But I'm just creating a pull request for, okay. Okay, so I just created a, okay, maybe I didn't. Okay, so I just created this tweet, which you can take a look at or suggest changes to and so forth. And that should result in the node account tweeting it out, which should get us more views and hopefully some more comments.
Yeah, seems reasonable to me.
Are we supposed to or entitled to review and approve this PR?
I think you can give, like I can approve it as a TSC member. I think, like, I don't know what happens in terms of the workflow, but I think you could look at it and say, I think that's good and give your +1 on it.
Let me approve and see what happens.
Right, yeah. I don't think
Yeah.
it's just going to tweet automatically. Like I think basically somebody from like either Joe or Tierney who's on the social team needs to actually land it. And I think it's actually, there's automation that like once it lands, that will actually generate the tweet. So approving should be no problem. There certainly haven't been a lot of tweets though.
Apparently mine doesn't get the like green circle check mark. Have to have red access.
Yeah, it's probably Jarish and I have just because we're TSC members, so we have access to everything.
Okay.
Versus, and then otherwise maybe you need to be part of the repo. Obviously, it's not enough to just be a collaborator, right? So,
okay.
But you could easily add your like comment +1 kind of thing, I think. I see you add, yeah, you added your approval, it just isn't green, but I think that's just as good in terms of people, they can see who's done that. Oh yeah, people involved in the diagnostics working group, so that looks good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd say, do that, see if you get any more responses. And And like maybe do one more or something, like if we don't get enough. And I'm not sure what other things we could do. We could like tag it for the agenda of the TSC if we thought that was useful. At some point, I think, you know, it may just be, let's publish what we think the use cases are and say, this is what we think we need to cover. If your use case isn't here, you know, we may, you know, we're not, if it's not in the list, then we may, you know, drop async hooks and not cover that use case, right?
Yeah.
Just sort of message that wherever we can. I suspect it's a smaller group of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My plan has kind of been to just like go through the use case list, and just make sure like we've built something to serve each of the use cases, and then like as we approach the end of that list, mark async hooks itself as deprecated, or we have that new like legacy one as well that might actually be more suitable for this.
Right.
Mark it as legacy, discourage people from using async hooks directly, and if anyone complains, then say, well, we have all these things.
Yeah.
Is there something that is not served by these?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. So we'll see if this triggers some more comments, but it's not going to be like tomorrow anyway, right? Because there's already a set of known use cases, but
yeah, there's still a bunch of stuff that needs to be built. Yeah, it'll be a while until we can properly deprecate or mark as legacy async hooks API.
yeah. Yeah, maybe I'm just seeing the comments, like maybe once we have a list, it's, you know, we just make sure the TSC is like, hey, here's the list, you know, and that's what we're going to work on. If there's a reason, if this list was fulfilled and you'd still say, hey, we shouldn't deprecate async hooks, that might be a way to trigger some discussion, right? Like, not saying we're doing it now, but like, hey, if this list was all covered, would people feel comfortable deprecating it or legacying it or whatever would be a.
Yeah.
All right. Anything more on this topic? If not, the last item in the agenda is add black box by default to the inspector 99. Rafael?
Yeah, actually, this PR is a bit was not keep going because of time, and also because, as we discussed had some meetings ago, looks like the prefix is not working properly, but I didn't invest time to go deeper on it yet. Also, I have noticed yet that the Google have removed from the Google Chrome the options to add the black box as an option. It's now renamed to ignore patterns, and I thinking if this feature is still useful, because since we know most of the people with the bug node.js is I don't know, use it to skip the internals when it's debugging username code. So I'm not sure if this is still a good feature or a good update to do, and I would like to see with you guys if we should keep going with it, because at first moment I don't see any good benefits from that.
So this was sort of limiting down the stack traces that people see by default, right?
Actually, I think mainly when you are debugging, like you are using debugging your code, and for some reason you do step into node.js, I don't know, file read string, and you don't want to see the internal code. You just want to to skip that and go to your function. Is for that, like when you enable the black box in the Google Chrome, usually it would be skipped. You don't see the internal node code. You normally go only for the application code.
Right. So today, so this would add the black box by default. People could, how easy could people remove them?
They remove the black box by default. Is not easy enough. If they are debugging by CLI, I would say that they need to communicate directly with the WebSocket and send the event debugger dot disable by black box, and it is not, I don't know, clear enough for them. So this is one more reason that I'm not sure about this feature. And if they are debugging through the, I don't know, Google Chrome, they only have options to remove that script. So it will be a bit more easy.
I guess I don't feel strongly one way or the other. Does anybody have any?
Is it fair to say that those who are debugging through the CLI have a better grip on the code base or what they are doing, and they will actually be more interested to see everything, whereas for those who are debugging through the GUI, maybe limiting to the application by default makes more sense. I'm looking from a very high level point of view, how the user experience can be improved, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Might also make
But,
sense to flag it.
Flag it and enable by default, or flag it and let disable as usually.
And it could just like leave it the way it is, and then have like a flag that's like saying like, no, really, I want to know what internals are doing.
Yeah, actually, it's what happens right now. We only don't have these flag options for the CLI.
So there is an option in the UI.
In the UI, yes. At least in the DevTools, you have the ignore scripts, as I mentioned in the issue. You have a link there, and you have a ignore list that you can add node prefix, for instance.
Right, but you'd have to add that yourself, right?
Exactly.
It's more the, like by default, okay, I'm just reading the one comment that says, why hide those internals versus other stuff? But, and then there's a comment that says, of course, we'd want to be able to turn it off.
Yeah. From my perspective, like at anything, like if there's like a failure that's coming from Node core, like a lot of the people using Node Inspect are not going to be equipped to do anything about it. Like if it's like a problem with Node core, if it's something that is like in this case, like it's a validation thing, like it's complaining if they don't give it a callback or something like that. And like in that case, then like you'd maybe want the context of what's going on. So it's kind of hard to say one way or the other.
I'm not sure what you mean. You mean for folks who work directly to the Node.js core, this feature could be, I don't know, could be annoying for them, or I misinterpreted.
And so in your example in the issue,
Sure.
it's doing like a validate callback check, and like having the context of like knowing it's doing that is helpful. Like it's like in this example maybe a little bit obvious, but if you have like several layers deep, somewhere it does some sort of validation and blows up, then like if it's like several layers deep of internals, it might just be exploding and you don't really know why.
Yeah.
So having
But
that visibility helps there.
Yeah, for sure. But actually, in the issue, we are talking about two different issues. The first one is if we should or not enable black box by default, and the second one, the issue shows that even adding the node prefix at the ignore list, it's not completely ignoring. Like I have add the node prefix to the black box script patterns, and even though the node internal validators was called, and I don't think that this is expected, it should only be skipped because I ignoring everything that prefix with node. So it would avoid any node interactions. And this is one of my concerns. Don't matter actually if we will add it by default or not. My concern is if the pattern matching is working properly.
Right, so it may not actually even be doing, like you're still not sure we can actually do a good job of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so maybe we should just not be doing it all, like doing it at all, or like have a flag to turn that on.
I wonder
Yeah.
if we could start with like a doc that says if you're seeing more than you want to, this is what you can do in terms of manually adding the black boxes.
Yeah, it would be great also.
Along with explaining what we think it covers and doesn't cover. Because if we had that, that would at least be like, hey, you can point somebody to that. And then that might be a good basis to actually get some input, say, hey, should Node apply this by default? Is this useful?
Yeah, makes sense.
So is that something that like you've got enough knowledge context that you could write up that bit of doc?
Yeah, sure. I would.
It's kind of like, here's how you
will.
turn it on in the UI. Here's how you turn it on in the command line, because that seems useful to me either way, right?
Yeah, a lot easy. I will just add to my to-do list to not forget.
Sounds good. And then that might help us when we look at it to say, it doesn't cover enough, let's just leave it as the doc. Or if we think it covers enough, maybe we can then have a blog post that says, hey, what do people think, kind of thing.
Okay. But even, for instance, even with this tutorial, passing the black box script, like for instance in the inspector, I passed that I don't want to see the internal scripts. But if the node.js validator is still, I don't know, not is unexpected behavior, I'm not sure if, I think that's a different issue, right? If we check if this still happens, I think that should be a new issue, and a new task further, right?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. And like in the article, it would be like document the limitation, like current,
Okay.
the limitations on how well it currently works.
Okay. Good one.
All right. Anything more on that? I wrote an action plan as for Rafael to document how to flip the configuration in both the GUI and the CLI mode. Is that the right representation of the action?
Yes.
Missed some conversation. Okay. Thanks. So that's pretty much the list of agenda we have.
Idris, could you just
And
hold
we
on
are
for a
top
minute
of
or
the-
two once you stop the recording?
Okay, sure.
I think that Elio should be promoted to panelist.